This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNRadio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Greeny. Thank you for checking out the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. What we got for you today, plenty of reaction to A-Rod's apology. Frank Caliendo reads the letter. You don't want to miss that. Andy Pettitte on his number being retired, and the latest NBA rumors with Legler and Marc Stein in studio.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
You know, I think we've all been in situations in our life where we knew an apology was necessary. We knew that an apology was something that we were going to have to offer whether we wanted to or not, and we had to sit around and figure out, how am I going to go about offering this apology, be it to a spouse, to a friend, to an employer, an employee, an acquaintance of any sort. And at no point did I sit down and say, I think I'm going to write it out longhand. And then
Definitely not.
And then hand it to them. Not at least since I was like 11. But that is the direction that Alex Rodriguez chose to go yesterday.
He tried to, put a personal touch on this by making it seem so sincere, because I actually took the time to sit down and write this out longhand. And really what you're talking about, and a lot of apologies fall into this category, what you're really doing is trying to, in some way, lessen the sting of the repercussions of your actions and move forward as quickly as you can, and that's clearly what this was for A-Rod.
Well, that was my first reaction when I saw it. When I saw it on Twitter yesterday, my first reaction, the thing I tweeted was, I'm confused. What is the purpose of the handwriting part of it? Who is it that is advising Alex Rodriguez? First of all, someone told him, here's an idea, Alex, last year. I got a great one for you. Sue baseball, sue the union, accuse the Yankee doctors of being, do all of that. Terrific idea. That worked out real well. Now someone said, here we go. You're having a little trouble figuring out with the Yankee organization where you're going to hold this press conference that you want to avoid, so you don't have to answer questions that are unanswerable anyway. Everyone knows what happened, and you can't really talk about it. So why don't we, here's an idea. Alex, here we go. I got one for you. We'll handwrite it. We'll make it look like something that a fourth grader was turning in as a book report, and that will make it seem so sincere that everyone will say, oh, he really means he's sorry this time. Who is it that thinks that the world is quite as stupid as that? I'm taken aback by the handwriting part of it.
The scary part is that was clearly the conversation that someone had with A-Rod. And the only thing that could have been worse, that I was thinking about it, as opposed to handwriting it, what if he texted it and he put sad face emojis, you know what I mean, like a broken heart, things like that, or he chiseled it, like Fred Flintstone style, that might have been worse, but it's clearly someone telling him, if you handwrite it, that seems like it's really coming from the heart. And that's the route he chose to take. It is
missing. You're right. The only thing it's missing is emoticons.
That's it.
You're exactly right, because I give up. I don't know what to say. I showed you this before the show began this morning. It continues to make me sad every time I look at it, in part because my kids are getting older and we're getting older. You and I, we've talked a lot about our kids. You coach your kids in sports, and we were just having this conversation Thursday. So I got this little baseball card here. It says Stevie when he was 5 years old. And my son, he's now 12. And the first year that he played Little League Baseball, and he's 5, and he played third base, and he's got this cute little picture of him, and he's a 5-year-old kid. And on the back, it gives your stats. And among the stats it gives is who is your favorite player. So it says Stevie Greenberg, age 5, height 3'11", position third base, favorite player Alex Rodriguez. See, so that's where I'm coming from. This is my son's favorite player.
Right.
Alex wrote a book years ago, a children's book, in which he's a little kid who's nervous about playing baseball, and he winds up hitting a home run. It's a pool shot because it goes out of the ballpark and lands in a pool. And my son and I read that book every single night. I read that story to him before he went to sleep. So I have been one who has always wanted, somewhere deep inside of me, to cut Alex a break, to cut him some slack, only because I remember so vividly a time when we loved him, when we cheered like crazy every time A-Rod came to the plate. And yet I've just run out of ability to rationalize anything that's going on. And again, would it have made any difference had this been typed yesterday? Probably not. But there's something about the handwriting of it yesterday that just galled me.
Right.
It just made me insane. I just said, who's thinking about this stuff? Who is it that said to him, write it by hand and release it that way. It'll just look so much. You know what? People think that PR types are always the ones doing these letters. So write it out by hand. Then everyone will know it really came from you. I'm just absolutely stunned by that. I don't look. At the end of the day, is that a particularly important part of this story? I guess it isn't. But the notion that someone actually went through the process of thinking of doing this and then doing it, for some reason yesterday, that was what I fixated on, because what he actually says is meaningless. What he actually says is exactly what you know he has to say, what you knew he would say, and everything else. So I went right past what he said to the way he wrote it, and for some reason, that continues to stick in my craw.
Well, let's just hope it doesn't come out at some point that that's not even his writing, that he was actually getting a pedicure, just like talking, and someone was writing it for him. Then it's a whole nother level. The first thing I thought of, you showed me that Little League card of your son, and you flipped it over, and I looked at the back, and it said 3'11", and the first thing I thought of was they couldn't give the kid an inch on the card, like they do that in basketball programs all the time. You couldn't go up 4 feet.
It would have been nice if they wouldn't give him 4 feet. No, weight 40 pounds. But I mean, that's just that's what it means. You remember? Look, I just showed you that I got a picture of my kids with Clyde Frazier. Right. That's my new screensaver. That was my idol. I loved Walt Frazier. I slept in New York Knicks number 10 footy pajamas my entire childhood because I loved Walt Frazier so much. That's who A-Rod was in my house.
Well, one of my favorite parts of the Little League World Series every year is when they go down and, the kid looks in the camera, each player, and they say their name and they say their position, and then they say their favorite player. Go back and look. Now, maybe not in the last 2 or 3 years, but go back and look, during A-Rod's prime, before all of this, right? And look at how many kids said Alex Rodriguez is my favorite player. It's incredible. Maybe more than any other except Derek Jeter. I bet if you went back and really tracked that from the American-born players. And it's sad because you're right. And it's sad to see for kids that look up to players the way that they do and their fall from grace and how hard and long this fall has come. And this, to me, doesn't do anything to mitigate that.
Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. You can save hundreds on your car, business, or recreational vehicle insurance from a local independent agent. Go to Progressive.com today. Now, that's Progressive. As I said, we're going to get to tons of hoops with legs. But for those of you who didn't see the letter yesterday, again, it's handwritten. But what he wrote was, to the fans, I take full responsibility for the mistakes that led to my suspension for the 2014 season. I regret that my actions made the situation worse than it needed to be. For those who don't know what he's referring to when he says my actions, he's not referring to the use of performance-enhancing drugs. He's referring to his scorched earth policy in which he sued Major League Baseball, he sued the Players Association, he absolutely accused the Yankees team doctors of medical malpractice and any number of other things. He says, to Major League Baseball, the Yankees, the Steinbrenner family, the Players Association, and you, the fans, I can only say I'm sorry. I accept the fact that many of you will not believe my apology or anything that I say at this point. I understand why, and that's on me. It was gracious of the Yankees to offer me the use of Yankee Stadium for this apology, but I decided the next time I'm in Yankee Stadium, I should be in pinstripes doing my job. I served the longest suspension in the history of the league for PED use. The commissioner has said the matter is over. The Players Association has said the same. The Yankees have said the next step is to play baseball. I'm ready to put this chapter behind me and play some ball. This game has been my single biggest passion since I was a teenager. When I go to spring training, I'll do everything I can to be the best player and teammate possible, earn a spot on the Yankees, and help us win. Sincerely, Alex. So that's a perfectly fine letter. It is a perfectly reasonable, predictable but appropriate sentiment to express. He seems to apologize to the right people, generally for the right things, gives a reasonable explanation, even though, see, the thing is that we all know that behind the scenes they were arguing, the two sides, over where he would hold his press conference, but whatever. In the absence of knowing that, he seems to give a reasonable explanation of why he chose to do this by letter. And then let's get on and play baseball, which at the end of the day is the right thing. I mean, that's the next step in all of this. Either he can play or he can't. Either he will or he won't. And that's what really matters here. So the content of the letter, I have zero problem with.
No, I have no problem with the content. I think what it comes down to is the credibility behind it. And, there are a few times in life when you need to be really, really sincere. You tell somebody you love them, you need to be pretty sincere when you do that. You need to be pretty sincere when you apologize to anybody for anything. And to me, with everything that A-Rod has lied about, when you come out with this, all he's really trying to do, he's trying to lessen the suffocating weight of what he is going to face when baseball season starts. When he's down in spring training and he has to face the media on a daily basis, when he has to go into Yankee Stadium for the first time and play again, when he has to go on the road in opposing stadiums and play again, he's trying to. Will it do that in any way, shape, or form? I don't think so, because I think people are just so far beyond believing anything that comes out of his mouth, including an apology, that to me this doesn't do anything to help him in that regard. But that's what he's trying to do. Take some of the bite out of it before I get back to playing baseball, which is ultimately what he really wants to do only.
I completely agree with you. It was a necessary step. I mean, he can't just show up in spring training and say, "Hi, everybody, I'm here, let's go." He has to address it somehow, right?
It's a preemptive strike is what it is.
It had to be done, so now it's been done. Now, that part of it you already know. If you were alive on this planet yesterday, then you were aware that he handwrote this letter and it was everywhere. What you may not know is that there is a full, lengthy story, and I mean, it was just printed and handed to me, and it is multiple pages long. I haven't counted it yet, but it is long, by J.D. Moringer, who has basically spent, it seems to me, from what I can tell, the majority of this past year with or around A-Rod, and has a lengthy description of his year, of his thoughts, and of other things involving Alex Rodriguez. You may not have known that. So let me give you the bullet points. There is a story that is posting at some time today on ESPN.com, again by J.D. Moringer, who is a terrific writer, who spent a lot of this year, it seems, with Alex, and has a fairly detailed, an extraordinarily detailed account of what's been going on with Alex Rodriguez over the past year that he was suspended, and more recently than that. Here are some of the bullet points. A-Rod has called several players and owners to apologize for his PED use. The story delves into why he took PEDs in the first place. The story says that A-Rod believes that what Tony Bosch gave him was a placebo. He had his 2 worst years statistically while he was on it. He says his meeting with Rob Manfred, which was recent, was welcoming, and that Major League Baseball considers his case a closed matter. Early in his suspension, it says he seriously considered retirement. It says that A-Rod has been in therapy, and Moringer calls his therapist, quote, one of 2 people in the world who knows something close to the whole story. It says that A-Rod is haunted by 2 great sorrows. One, his father left when he was 9, for which he blamed himself, and he never went to college, which makes him feel intellectually overmatched. It talks about his secret visits to colleges, taking the campus tour at 60 so far, and that he is intent on completing his education, and that he took a college marketing class while he was on suspension. It says that despite how it looks, A-Rod has sought out the counsel of Barry Bonds, whom A-Rod admires as a hitting scientist, and that his next great hurdle is to tell the whole story to his 10-year-old daughter, Natasha. Those are some of the bullet points of what is in the story. Again, it will be available today. I don't know exactly what time, but it's going up at some point today on ESPN.com, and then it's in the issue of ESPN, the magazine, that'll be on newsstands on Friday. Here's my question for you, Tim Legler. Again, you're a former basketball player, and you're a basketball analyst by trade. But like everybody else, you're just a sports fan, and you're just a human being. You know, I think that we live in a ridiculously forgiving society. We're going to have Andy Pettitte on later this morning. The world has forgiven Andy Pettitte completely. Andy Pettitte did not volunteer an admission of his use of HGH. He was named in the Mitchell report. He thus had to come out and acknowledge what he did, and he did. But Andy Pettitte apologized, seemed sincere about it, was a nice guy and has treated people nicely, and is now having his number retired by the New York Yankees. And everybody still loves him. So we live in a ridiculously forgiving society. But the problem that I think Alex Rodriguez is going to have is that what we can forgive is the crime. What we do not forgive is the cover-up. The 2 guys who I think don't get forgiven are Lance Armstrong and Alex Rodriguez. Because people would have forgotten in 10 minutes that Lance Armstrong cheated to win bike races. But the stories about everyone that he sued and threw under the bus, and lives he was willing to destroy, and people he was willing to trample in order to achieve all this, that's the stuff I think people won't get past. And so with Alex, I think that the PED part of this is like 9th on the list of things that people are going to continue to hold against him. Do you agree or disagree?
I completely agree, because, look, we all have the ability to forgive, and we tend to forgive, particularly when you feel like the person that made the mistake and they're apologizing to you is a good person and generally has done the right things, but they definitely erred in judgment in some capacity and did something wrong, even if it's a really bad thing that they've done to you or a group of people. The problem with this is when you do everything you can over a very long period of time to deny that you've done anything, and finally you're so trapped in a corner that now you say, okay, you know what, I'm really sorry. That, to me, is where you lose really all the sincerity behind this. And then it's really hard to forgive because now you look and all the things you're talking about, throwing people under the bus and doing everything you can to intentionally harm others, to try to protect yourself. Now you come off as more than a person that made a mistake. You come off as a bad guy. And when you're a bad guy, you're a lot less likely to be forgiven. And that is the situation with A-Rod and certainly the situation with Lance Armstrong.
You know what, that's an excellent, I think you're making an excellent distinction. There's a big distinction between people who exercise poor judgment, made bad decisions, and you know what, one could even argue that they were, under some circumstances, reasonable decisions, okay? I can't sit here and justify the use of doping and EPO and everything else in cycling. But what I can tell you is that I fully believe that Lance Armstrong was living in a world in 2003 or whatever it was that this whole thing started, where he genuinely believed and was probably 100% right that his options were do this or you can't compete. Right?
Correct.
Everyone else is doing it.
No question.
So if you want to compete, if you want to play on this field, which was his dream and all of that kind of stuff, then you have no choice but to do this. And I can't sit here and tell you what I would have done in that circumstance. Look, you got to live your dream, right? You were a kid who grew up loving basketball, and against a lot of odds, and you went, a long route. You played in the CBA, you played in other countries, you finally got your shot in the NBA, and you made it. You played in the NBA. Now, the NBA is a little bit different from this. But if you had been in a situation at one point where you were, what other countries you told me?
I played in France.
In France, you're playing in France, and maybe you're this close. You're this close to the NBA, and there's some pill you can take that is against the rules, but you probably won't get caught doing it, and no one but you will know. And you take this pill, and you could be in the NBA. You might have done it.
Yeah,
right?
It's impossible to say no. That I know for sure that I wouldn't. Particularly if everyone around you was.
Right. And
you saw them, taking the gains from it. And now you're saying to yourself, man, if I want to be on an even playing field with these guys, is this what I need to do? Look, it wasn't around. It wasn't prevalent. And it's not even nearly as prevalent in basketball. At least it wasn't when I played. Who knows now? I'm not in NBA locker rooms on a daily basis.
No, it doesn't translate, I think, into really basketball the way it does in baseball.
Not nearly as much.
But the point is, that's my point, is that you could justify. I'm not in any way suggesting that what these guys did was right, but it's easy to understand. But you'd like to. So those are people that you say could be good, decent, normal, moral people who exercised bad judgment.
Correct.
Made a questionable decision. Now, once you start destroying other people's lives, that changes the dynamic. Because that, I'd like to think, if I am a decent person and you were a decent person, you would not do. That if you got caught and the question became either a question of taking the heat for it, whatever that heat might be, or falsely accusing, suing, just trampling over anyone and anything in your path in order to try and keep yourself above it, that you'd like to think you wouldn't do.
No question.
And once you've done that, you have now crossed the line that you correctly identified that separates a good guy who did a bad thing from a bad guy.
Well, who are the scariest people, right? The scariest people are people that lack a conscience and lack a soul. They're terrifying people because they have absolutely no thought of what they're doing other than to protect themselves and to better their life and to better their situation, regardless of who they may hurt. Those people scare me because there's no telling what they can do. And that, to me, is the way that A-Rod has really conducted himself for a really long period of time. All this comes down to is he's not walking away from $60 million. He still does love to play baseball, and he wants to get back on the field and try to do that and not end his career, being suspended and then retiring. He wants to come back and at least have some memorable baseball moments, and he's certainly not walking away from that money. That is about all I take from all of this, and he's trying to just see if he can somehow make it a little bit more comfortable to walk into a stadium and walk into a batter's box again.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
We'll begin again as we opened up the show this morning, Legs, with what I think is a very interesting distinction. Alex Rodriguez wrote this handwritten apology letter, And again, it just feels like another ridiculously transparent way of trying to make it something a little bit different and a little more heartfelt and whatever it is. And I agree with all of the school of thought that I've heard of people saying there was nothing he was going to be able to do and nothing he was going to be able to say that was going to change people's perspective. So I guess at the end of the day, what does it matter that he hand wrote a letter? I think you this morning made the key point, and that is, in America, we are very, very willing to forgive people that we think did bad things. But there's a distinction between people who do bad things and people who we have identified as just being bad people.
Right.
And when you do the things that Lance Armstrong did, I'm not talking about the doping. And when you do the things that A-Rod has done over the last year and a half, and we're not talking about the PEDs, it crosses that line. And I think that gets into an area where people, I think, a lot of people lose the capacity to forgive.
It's hard to forgive people that you think don't have a conscience. It's really difficult to do that. Look, we all make mistakes throughout our lives, some of them big ones, and we do the best we can if you're a good person with a conscience and a soul to try to atone for that. And not only apologize, but then try to show by your actions how sincere you were about how much it meant to you to hurt the people that you care about. And then there's other people that apologize because they're trying to do everything they can can we just get on to the next thing? Can this be over with?
Right.
And those apologies take place, in marriages all the time. It's like, you're in the doghouse for something for a couple of days. You just apologize as much as you can because you just want to get back to watching the game.
Right.
Ultimately,
right.
Those kind of things happen. And for A-Rod, you just get the feeling it's kind of like that. Like, is this enough? Can we just now move on and not talk about it anymore? And when you have basically consistently lied for as long a period of time as he has, there's very little sympathy you're going to be able to elicit out of anybody.
Genuinely damaged other people as well.
Correct.
Along the way. So I agree with you. And, because the other side of it is this. Lance Armstrong, before this most recent thing that came out about him with this traffic incident involving him and a woman and them claiming that she was driving, whatever it was, there was an interview I saw with him where he said, if I had it to do again, would I dope again? And the answer was, if we were going back to when he did it, the answer is probably yes. And I fully understood that. I fully understood it. And during this last break, I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. During this last commercial break, Steve Cerruti was sitting up here, our associate producer, and you were regaling him with stories about your days in the CBA. Right? Tim Legler, he made it the hard way to get to the NBA. He wound up playing 10 years in the NBA, but started in the CBA and played in Europe and all that kind of stuff. And you're telling us crazy stories about guys getting cut that day and wearing someone else's uniform and them showing up in the the layup line. You don't even know who they are. That's basketball, right? That's what you were going through. Now, let's go back to that.
Okay.
You didn't know then you were going to wind up in the NBA. You're someday going to be the three-point champion. You're going to play 10 years in the league and wind up an analyst on ESPN. At that point, you're thinking, I'm just hanging on for dear life.
Right.
If someone offered you at that point some shortcut, that came off the back of a truck somewhere and said, hey, this is going to get you there. This is going to get you out of this. And look at those guys. They're staying in 4 seasons, right? They got people, they're flying on charter jets. And everywhere they go, people are screaming and yelling and asking for their autograph, and women are throwing themselves at them, and they're making millions of dollars. You telling me you're not at least giving that some serious consideration?
There's no question I would have been, particularly when, and what we were talking about off the air was, I found out during that time when I came out of school, and I had a lot of options, because of what I did academically at LaSalle. I had some pretty good options if I didn't want to play. I found out how much I loved the game by going through all that, but at the same time, I had such a yearning to get out of that league and get to the NBA. If somebody came to me with something and convinced me, I'm telling you right now, this is a difference maker, particularly if I felt like other guys were gaining an advantage that I was playing against, fighting for the same thing. I can't sit here and say definitively I wouldn't have done it. Now I will say this. I tend to be very cautious and conservative in my thinking, and I weigh things through pretty carefully when I'm faced with things like this kind of discussion we're having now. And maybe I would have lost sleep over it, and my conscience would have bothered me, like, what if this turned out badly for me and what it did to me physically or my body or long-term effects. I would think about those kind of things, but there's no doubt I would spend a lot of time thinking about the other side of it, and that is what I would be constantly struggling with and weighing. And I can't sit here and definitively tell you either way that I would have gone. And A-Rod saying that he would have still done it, that's probably about the one honest thing he said that I understand. I go, you know what, at least he admitted that.
It was Lance who said it. It was Lance
Armstrong.
Yeah,
Lance Armstrong.
Yeah, and I believe it too. And that's the thing. I don't know what I'd have done in that situation. And I certainly don't know what I would have done if you're in that situation and you didn't have all those other options coming out of LaSalle, as a lot of people don't. You know, if you don't have other choices, if it's this or, you know, your life just gets thrown into some state of total chaos and now you have no idea where to go and what to do. So I think that most rational people, while they don't approve of the use of performance-enhancing drugs, which is cheating, you understand it. You understand the mentality that gets guys there. Gola talks about it all the time. He says that in football, in his opinion, the two primary reasons that people use it are, A, to rehab injuries,
right.
which is, Mike is very open about the fact that he did it. He used
right.
one cycle of steroids when his shoulder got torn up,
right.
and he felt like if he wasn't ready for a training camp or mini camps, I think it was, that he would just get cut. He wasn't
right.
a good enough player, so he used that so he could rehab faster. And there's that, and then he says, it's not the stars. It's the guys on the fringe.
Right.
It's the guys who are using it just to stay there, to get from AAA. That step from being like, you know, a good minor league player to being the 25th guy on a major league roster, that's you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in lifestyle, it's night and day.
You bring up a great point, because I also dealt with it. Right? So the year I led the league in three-point shooting, best year of my career. I was only 29 years old. I blow my knee out at the end of that season. I tear 3 ligaments at the same time, and it changed the course of my career and really what would have been, I think, the last 8 to 10 years of my career, playing the way I did, which I think I still had in front of me, changed all of that. If someone came to me when I was rehabbing that and I was dealing with all the pain and stiffness and soreness and did not feel like the same guy that I did and said, look, man, this will help you recover and enable you to get back to who you were and extend your career, man, that's a real hard thing to say no to. But, back when I was coming out of LaSalle, somebody came to me and I felt healthy and I was fine, and they just said, this will improve your performance, I probably would have really been cautious about that. Like, what is this going to do to my body? Is it going to change I've been pretty successful at to this point, and maybe my work ethic will end up getting me where I want to go anyway. I would be worried about that, but for just getting back to where you were and recovering from a devastating injury, that's a really hard thing to say no to.
And the point, I mean, Marc Schlereth has said on this show many times that if steroids hadn't been tested for when he was playing, to quote him, my butt would have been a pincushion. So
looked like a checkerboard back there.
Yeah, you get it, exactly. So my point is, people get that.
Right.
So I get it with A-Rod. I get the cheating. I get him doing it 3 times. I do. You want to play? You want to make your contract? You want to live up to the expectations? You want to be a superstar? I'm not in any way condoning it, but I get it. But you'd like to think that it ends there, and that if you're caught, that you don't then say, okay, who can I destroy to get me out of this? And that's when you cross a line. That's when you're crossing a line into borderline sociopathic behavior. So now you go from being potentially a good person who did a bad thing to being a bad person.
Correct.
And that's the part of it that I think people do not have any interest whatsoever in forgiving.
And a person who has lied so much that they've actually convinced themselves that that is the truth. And that's what I think A-Rod has done.
All right, so that's with Alex Rodriguez. Dallas Braden, who works with us now, had this thought.
First off, you take it as an act of nobility. I appreciate the time and effort spent, I guess, to sit down and write the apology. But at the end of the day, that apology doesn't bring back any of those home run balls over the fence led up by some guys that are probably sitting behind the desk right now, not too happy that this guy took advantage of their position with all of the extra help he had. So while the apology is noble in its effort, at this point in time, he does need to take a note from Marshawn Lynch, and from here on out, just be about that action, boss, and keep it tight and go out there and try to perform and do what you can do. But as far as the apology is concerned, that ship left dock a long time ago for a lot of ball players, past and present, and they're ready to just move on at this point, in my opinion.
I think a lot of fans feel the same way as well.
Well, for me, I will say this, and just a person that loves baseball, loves sports, and follows it, the one thing about this that dilutes it for A-Rod just a little bit in my mind, the culpability, is because of the era and how many guys were involved in taking these. And there are lots of guys. You'll never convince me there aren't a lot more guys that weren't caught that we don't know about. So if this was like the only guy, he was the only guy that knew these existed, and we found out he was taking them and no one else was ever culpable in this, to me that's different than I have a lot of doubt in my mind about everybody that played in that era and what they were doing. So to act like every pitcher that, gave up home run balls to A-Rod was clean and it somehow, affected their career, it's hard for me to buy into that either. A-Rod's he's been the guy because of the way he's conducted himself and because of the numbers he's put up and the way he's benefited from it.
Tim Legler is here with us this morning in for Gola. Just when we thought the trade deadline in the NBA was going to come and go and nothing of interest was going to happen, a guy by the name of Goran changed all of that. And Marc Stein is going to join us on our set with the very latest on what could be a very significant move made before tomorrow's deadline. And as of last night, this NBA trade deadline just got a little bit more interesting with word that Goran Dragic wants out of Phoenix. He wants to go to the Lakers or the Knicks. They don't have anything in the world that we can think of to trade for him. Houston wants him, but he doesn't want them. This gets fascinating, and so we need to bring in our NBA insider extraordinaire, Marc Stein, who joins us in our studio. Good morning, Marc.
Hi, boys.
Or as PJ was calling you the other day, Steiny. I'm sitting up there with Steiny. He's got a nickname. PJ Carlesimo has a nickname for literally everybody.
Pretty much. I don't think he calls anyone by their given name.
Do people generally call you Steiny, or is that just him?
That's pretty common. Unfortunately, I get a lot of Steiny Mo thanks to Bill Simmons, which I'm not quite as fond of.
Okay.
But, Steiny works.
Okay, we'll work it either way. Okay, so let's start there. What are we hearing out of Phoenix with Dragic? They've got, they're on the clock now till tomorrow afternoon. What's the very latest?
Well, they're in a real tough spot because everybody knows now that Dragic wants out, so that hurts their leverage. And also, if you're going to trade anything good for Dragic, you got to be sure you can keep him. And so there are teams like Houston, like Sacramento, that are so bold, they probably would trade for Dragic even without that assurance. And then you have teams like the Lakers and the Knicks. You said it. They don't have a lot of assets. So they might say, you know what, shouldn't we just wait till free agency when we can offer this guy 4 years, $80 million, and not have to give anything up for him? But Phoenix now is motivated to try to get something done because they don't want to see Dragic walk out the door for nothing. So this is going to dominate the next 28, 29, 30 hours until we hit the deadline Thursday at 3.
How did this go south so quickly? Goran Dragic is their best player. I know that it's been insinuated that, Isaiah Thomas coming in and Bledsoe, and now there's a 3-guard rotation. He plays off the ball more. He's not happy. Does it really come down to that? Or would Goran Dragic not have re-signed in Phoenix anyway if they made none of those moves?
No, I think he would have because he could have gone a lot of places in 2012 when he was a free agent, and the chance to kind of go back to Phoenix, take over for Nash, who really mentored him. Nash and Dragic are really, really close. Dragic, looks up to Nash as the guy who brought him into this league and, kind of taught him stuff. So he wanted to go back to Phoenix. I think he's the closest thing they have to a face of the franchise there. They brought in Bledsoe. The two of them played well together, but long term, I think deep down, everybody in Phoenix knows, can you really win that way with 2 point guards? How far are you going to go with that group? Then they bring in Isaiah Thomas. There's been times this year that Dragic is playing the 3. I mean, he's off the ball a ton, and that's made him really unhappy. So first the Suns said, we're going to try to trade Isaiah Thomas to make you happy. They've been trying that for weeks. They can't find a taker for Isaiah Thomas. So Dragic, I think also he does want to go to a big market now. I think he kind of sees that as a big lure, but he wants big money, big market, and most of all, he wants his own team. And in Phoenix, even if he stays, the sense is if he plays next to Bledsoe, he's not going to have his own team.
Mike and Marc Stein in our studio. So let's have fun and play the game. What could the Knicks or Lakers, if they really tried, offer Phoenix that might entice a deal?
Well, Phoenix is going to want at least one good pick out of this, and you're probably going to have to bring in another team to come up with some of the pieces that they want. Julius Randle is a guy the Lakers theoretically could throw into this, but he's lost his whole rookie year to injury. These teams are barren in terms of assets. The Knicks don't have a draft pick till 2018, 2019 that they can even put into a deal. So I think also from the Lakers' perspective is fascinating here because, remember, they forfeit their first to Phoenix if they don't have a top 5 pick. If they suddenly get Dragic now, they're going to win more games and could potentially jeopardize their first-round pick. So if the Lakers have a strong feeling that they're the leaders for Dragic in free agency, and the Lakers do kind of have that sense that they're in the lead, they might just say, you know what, let's take our chances. Let's wait till July and throw a boatload of money at this guy.
Two other teams that have come up, Houston and Miami. Houston is a team that Dragic apparently has indicated he doesn't want to stay with. But with the Rockets sensing that, you know what, we're pretty darn close, and as long as we don't give up Harden or Howard, the other pieces we can replace if we have to. Let's go for it. Maybe he comes, falls in love with the situation, and we re-sign him. Although maybe he doesn't want to play with Harden, I don't know, because the way he dominates the basketball. But what's the likelihood something happens there? And then what about the Miami Heat?
I think you hit on it exactly. The reason Dragic doesn't want to play in Houston is because, again, he's going to have to share the ball with Harden. Harden, even though he's not a point guard, so ball dominant, it's not really a great fit. But Houston, I heard this last night, even though they know they're not on his wish list, they're not backing off. I mean, that is classic Houston, to just go for it big, swing as big as you can. They would trade for Goran Dragic. The question with Houston is they've got a very nice lottery pick that they obtained from New Orleans last summer in the Omer Asik trade. Are they willing to surrender that with no guarantee that they can keep Dragic? That's probably too high a price for Houston. Miami's another one that, again, no real assets, but they know Dragic would give them a look. So do you try to cobble something together now, or are you better off just waiting until July and going after him with free agent money? But there are teams like Houston. Again, Sacramento is another one that is gutsy enough to trade for Dragic with no guarantee, and you hope that you could make him happy. But Houston is at the top of that list. They'll try anything, those guys.
Mike and Mike, Marc Stein is in our studio Sunday, 7 to 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio. NBA Lockdown, the Insiders, with Marc Stein and Brian Windhorst and company. All right, so let's move past that. So Dragic now moves to the center of the conversation, but there are other potential moves to be made, not necessarily the sexiest names, but potentially in a jam-packed West in particular, some guys who could make a difference. So what else are you looking at?
I think most people have their eye on the Denver Nuggets because they've got almost their whole team available. Aaron Laflalo, a lot of interest in him. There's even some thought that maybe they would move Ty Lawson, maybe they would move Wilson Chandler, but Denver got 2 first-round picks for Mozgov from Cleveland. So Denver has they're asking pretty high prices for all their guys, but Denver's right in the heart of it. Brook Lopez, it's gone quiet on that front in Brooklyn, but most teams, the Nets are always a very active team, so most people believe that, yes, the Nets are going to re-engage and get serious here in this last day plus before the end of the trading deadline. Oklahoma City with Reggie Jackson. I'm not so sure he moves. A lot of people around the league think, okay, Deion Waiters is there now. Oklahoma City will definitely trade him. Oklahoma City would have traded him in the summer if they were really worried about free agency. Would not surprise me to see OKC keep Reggie Jackson, but after Dragic, he's the point guard that everybody wants. So we're gonna see plenty of activity between now and the buzzer at 3 p.m. tomorrow.
Hearing any interest, Joe Johnson possibly to the Pistons?
Yeah,
I guess that's surfaced.
Detroit has inquired, but the message from the Nets are that they don't want to just dump Joe Johnson for salary. They're holding out hope that they can get something of value for Joe Johnson or Brook Lopez that isn't just expiring contracts, that isn't just getting salary off their books, and that's what's really slowed things down. They're not just looking to just get Johnson's contract off their books because they need to make the playoffs. The Nets have no picks. So it does them no good to trade Joe Johnson away for a Brandon Jennings who's injured, missed the playoffs. Now they're completely stuck. The Nets have to make the playoffs in the East. They have to.
And then finally, how about the little wheeling and dealing kind of moves? Like when we were taking questions for Legler earlier today, there was talk about, do the Bulls need to go out and get a shooter? Those kinds of little things that most basketball fans might not say, well, there's a headline, but might actually make a big difference when we get to the playoffs.
It's funny. We've seen so much action already that a lot of the playoff teams have already addressed their needs. Like you mentioned the Bulls. I don't get the sense that they're going to do anything huge. You remember, a move like that is a Ray Allen, is a Tayshaun Prince. Tayshaun Prince is most likely not going to be traded by Thursday's deadline. And then the Celtics, once they realize they can't trade him, they'll buy Tayshaun Prince out. And you got teams like the Clippers that want to get Tayshaun Prince. Ray Allen, free agent, available. Still 15 teams in the league are trying to get him. Those kind of moves will probably happen after the deadline. But we've already seen. Rondo to Dallas. They just got Stoudemire. Memphis made the big Jeff Green move. So teams made those moves early this year. They're not waiting around.
It's Marc Stein, and obviously he's not waiting around. He'll be awful busy between right now and tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, the NBA trade deadline. And he's with us with his Subway Fresh Take, the new Subway Simple 6 menu, 6 subs, 6 meals, $6 every day. Subway, eat fresh. Steiny, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steiny Mo.
Thanks for the invite.
Steiny Mo with us in our studio.
Mike and Mike.
And I think from the moment that letter, that handwritten letter of apology from Alex Rodriguez first started circulating on Twitter and everything else yesterday, from that instant, the first thing I started hearing from people was, you need Frank Caliendo to read that letter as Morgan Freeman. Of all the things we've ever done on this show, maybe the thing that got the most attention was when Frank Caliendo as Morgan Freeman read the LeBron letter. That wound up, Jimmy Fallon wound up running it on his show. It was everywhere. So Frank Caliendo, it was live in Las Vegas this morning, joins us now on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, and he is going to help us offer a unique take on the Alex Rodriguez apology letter. Good morning, Frank.
Hey, how are you?
We are fine. Timmy Legler is here. How long did it take before people started asking you to do the Morgan Freeman impression from the moment that letter came out yesterday?
I think it was so fast it broke the space-time continuum, and they were actually asking for it before the letter came out.
Okay, here's the question. Do you read it differently before we do the letter? Do you read it differently because it was handwritten?
I don't know.
The handwritten factor in all of this is the one, Frank, that, even as a comedian, I can't imagine that you could come up with something even funnier than that. The notion that someone actually sat in a room and said, I tell you what, we want this to seem really sincere. Let's have it be handwritten. I still can't get over it.
Yeah, I always find it funny. I remember a Barkley apology a while ago, and Barkley had the greatest apology because he looked into the camera, and he didn't do what everybody else always does. He didn't do that, I apologize for the following reasons my lawyer says I should be sorry. He didn't do that. He went, I made a mistake. And so that always, that's my favorite because he looked directly into the camera and just spoke. Written word always makes me laugh a little bit, but I actually think the letter's pretty good. But to me, and people made this point on Twitter to me, they're like, could you read it as Morgan Freeman because we'll believe it more. It gives it some credence. And I thought, well, that's actually a great point and the reason to, because now anytime somebody comes out with some sort of letter, people will trickle in with, hey, can you do it as Morgan Freeman? But this one, so many people did, and Ray, your producer, had hit me early. So many other people wanted me to do that for other shows and stuff, too, that I said, well, Mike and Mike already have brought it up, and so many people on Twitter were asking to do it, so I think that Mike and Mike is the place to do it.
All right, so let's do it. Bubba, give me some music. We're going to change it up a little this time. It will not be only Morgan Freeman who will be reading the A-Rod letter, but that's where we will begin. Morgan Freeman, the stage is yours.
To the fans, I take full responsibility for the mistakes that led to my suspension for the 2014 season. I regret that my actions made the situation worse than it needed to be. To Major League Baseball, the Yankees, the Stein family, the Players Association, and you, the fans, I can only say, I'm sorry. I accept the fact that many of you will not believe my apology or anything that I say at this point. Understand why, and that's on me. It was gracious of the Yankees to offer me the use of Yankee Stadium for this apology. But I decided the next time I'm in a Yankee Stadium, I should be in pinstripes doing my job.
John Gruden.
I'll tell you what, man, I served the longest suspension in the history of the league for PED use. The commissioner has said the matter is over. The Players Association had said the same. The Yankees have said the next step is to play baseball, man. I'm ready to put this chapter behind me and play some ball.
Chris Berman.
This game has been my single biggest passion since I was a teenager. When I go to spring training, I'll do everything I can to be the best player and teammate possible for the spot on the Yankees. And help us win. Sincerely, Alex.
Oh, that's magnificent.
That's
I have only one regret, and that's that he didn't write a longer letter.
I agree.
I mean, I was going to throw Stephen B. Smith in there, but the Morgan Freeman, Frank, was so perfect. I think that maybe off the air we'll just record one full Morgan Freeman version, and that will be the one that goes, because the Morgan Freeman really did suit this absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, it was one of those, and like I said, and I'm not apologizing or anything, but a little piece of me feels bad doing this, but like Alex Rodriguez even says halfway through, or, at the beginning, he's like, you may not believe me, I brought this on myself, and I just keep going, yeah, you kind of did.
Frank Caliendo, you can follow him on Twitter, at Frank Caliendo, and if you want to see him doing his stand-up, which he is terrific, he's going to be in Toledo, the Stranahan Theater in Toledo, the Hollywood Casino outside of Cincinnati, March 6th and 7th. The website, frankonstage.com, has all of his concert dates. So I strongly recommend going to see Frank, because there's a whole lot of this and a whole lot more. Frank, you are the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Mike and Mike.
When I was a kid, I grew up in New York, and I've said this many times before, Walt Frazier was my favorite player ever in any sport. I used to sleep in New York Knicks number 10 footy pajamas. And the opportunity to my kids, because their dad works in this business and everything else, they've had a chance to meet a lot of people they were a lot more excited about. I can tell you that. My son was vaguely aware of who Clyde Frazier was. My daughter had no idea who Clyde Frazier was. She was very impressed by the jacket that he was wearing. But overall, I mean, my daughter was very excited to meet Ansel Elgort, the heartthrob actor, and my son was very excited to meet Kevin Hart. But I was excited that my kids got to meet Walt Frazier, because that was my idol as a kid. So to me, all these years later, I mean, he won the championship in 1970 and 1973. All these years later, here I am as a grown man, and I was thrilled to be able to introduce him to my kids and to have a picture now that I will have for the rest of my life of my kids with Walt Frazier. They just showed it up there on TV. And again, I have it up on Twitter at ESPN Greeny if you want to see it. The jacket that Clyde is wearing is truly unbelievable. Anyway, I would juxtapose that with the other picture that I put up there. When my son Steven was 5, I coached him in baseball. And in their little league that they played in, it wasn't even little league, it was like 5-year-old baseball. It was coach pitch, and it was the first chance that all the little 5-year-olds in our town got to play baseball. They came in like on the last day of the season, and some company comes in and they take pictures of each of the kids, and they make little baseball cards that you can order. And I love those, and I have them, and I will keep them with me for the rest of my life. All the pictures I have of Stevie, both my kids actually, Stevie and Nikki. But on the back of Stevie's first card, when he's 5 years old, and I just put a picture of it up on Twitter, it shows you a little picture of him, and it tells you his height, he was 3'11", and his age, he was 5. His weight, he was 40 pounds. His position, he played third base, and his favorite player was Alex Rodriguez. So when you think about that, that's what Alex Rodriguez has forfeited. That's what he has lost. That's who he'll never be now. Because Alex Rodriguez was someone who was someday going to be the guy that my son Stevie and a generation of kids his age was going to run into somewhere, maybe not, backstage at a basketball event, but was going to run into in a hotel lobby or in a restaurant or somewhere on the street with their kids. And they were going to say, would you mind taking a picture? A-Rod, you were my favorite player when I was a kid. You were my hero. You were my idol. I grew up wanting to be just like you. I grew up wanting to be you. Would you take a picture with my kids? And that guy would have taken that picture, and he would treasure it forever. Now, I don't know what the monetary value of that is. Alex Rodriguez has a heck of a lot more money than Clyde Frazier is ever going to see. And he always will. A-Rod, on some level, has already long since won. If this was a game of winning and losing, he has won. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's going to get paid $60 million more the rest of his career, regardless of how little baseball he is actually able to play anymore. So if we're actually keeping track of winners and losers, it would be very hard to say that he hasn't won. But what is the value of being someone's hero? What is the value of having that kind of respect? Walt Frazier, every building he walks into for the rest of his life and for the last 40 years, has had someone like me say something like that to him, and has had some little kids just like mine take a picture with him. And I have no idea how you would quantify that. And I have no idea if you would trade that for $60 million or for $100 million or for whatever A-Rod has, which might be $500 million. I don't know. I have no idea what he's worth. Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe it was worth it. But I think that in the end, when you count up everything a person accomplishes in their life, what Walt Frazier has greater value. Walt Frazier has people who idolize him. And if you just look much more recently, instead of going all the way back into the past to a player that probably half the people listening to me right now don't even remember, just look a few steps to Alex Rodriguez's side when he was playing third base all that time. Because I can also still hear in my head both of my kids, my son Stevie and my daughter Nikki, saying, "Now betting for the Yankees, number 2, Derek Jeter." They could do that in their little tiny kids' voices. And Derek Jeter will have that. He will have that for the rest of his life. Now, he's got the money, too. And he's got all the women, that he's dated and all them. I guess he's the guy who genuinely has had it all. He's the Clyde of this generation. But I think that at the end of the day, if you were to ask Derek Jeter which of those is more valuable to him, all of the money or the admiration and respect and love, I don't know what he'd answer. I've never been in either of those positions. So I can't tell you which of those actually has greater value. But I do know that I just put those two pictures up on Twitter, and I will be able to look at them both for the rest of my life. And one of them will always make me happy. And one of them will always make me sad. And maybe life was a little simpler for us as kids because our heroes didn't fall in sports. The heroes that I had, if there had been this 24-hour news cycle and Twitter and ESPN and Mike and TMZ and everything else, I don't know what Clyde was doing in the 60s and the 70s. I probably don't want to know. And if there had been stuff going on then, all the heroes that we had, when we were, all of us, all of you who are listening to me who are old enough to remember a time before we treated sports and the world of sports the way we treat it today, then maybe we would have the same kind of feelings about our heroes that our kids are going to have. But there is, I will confess, a side of me that feels a little bit sad that my kids will not remember their childhood heroes the way I remember mine. I would be very surprised if 40 years from now, Stevie runs into Alex Rodriguez in a hotel, and Stevie's walking with his two kids and says, "Hey, A-Rod, when I was a little kid, you were my favorite player. I loved watching you play. You were my hero. Would you mind taking a picture with my kids?" So that, to me, is the real loss in all of this. And, again, I don't know how much money that's worth. And you take a person who has nothing and say to them, would you be willing to sacrifice your reputation and practically everything that anyone thinks about you for hundreds of millions of dollars? Probably most people would do it. They probably would. And that's fine. I'm not going to suggest that that's wrong. As I said before, Alex Rodriguez has won 100 times over, 1,000,000 times over. But he'll never have what Walt Frazier has. And those are the thoughts that I had running around in my head this morning as I was looking at those pictures.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
It is our pleasure to welcome now to Mike and Mike on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline one of the terrific players in Yankee history, and now one of those to be honored with his number being retired at Yankee Stadium. Andy Pettitte joins us on Mike and Mike on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Andy, it's Greeny here. Congratulations.
Hey, buddy, thank you very much, man. Just so excited. It's just really, really a great honor.
Can you take us through that phone call? I mean, it's for the 99.999% of us who will never have that experience in our lives of having a team call us and tell us that they're retiring our number. Who calls you? How does that process work?
Yeah, well, it was funny. They were texting me and just trying to find out what my, summer was going to look like, just because, unfortunately, I missed Derek Jeter's day because 6 months before that I had planned a hunt for my boys in Colorado. So, earlier in the week they were texting me, letting them know what were some dates that I would be available during the summer because my kids' schedule is just so crazy. And then the next thing I know, 4 or 5 days later after I spent up some days, they called me and said, "Man, we are going to, honor you with a plaque in Monument Park. We want to retire your number." And And, I think everyone's kind of saying the same thing. You're just like, what the heck? I thought that they were asking me for dates for somebody else's day. I mean, and it just, it was, so just really, I don't even know what to say other than just your kind of your head spinning and you're just like, wow. I mean, what a great honor. I don't even, it's really speechless. So thankful. I was so blessed to be on some great teams and have so many great players around me. And like I've said 100 times, I'm a product of that.
So your number will go up there on that wall, and no Yankee ever again is going to wear it, and that will be there in that stadium forever. When you think about your career at Yankee Stadium, and there was so many moments, is there one that stands out? You'll go back there. Obviously, this is going to be a highlight for you, going there and having a ceremony to retire your number. Do you have a moment at Yankee Stadium in your career that stands out for you more than any other?
Well, I would say, two for sure, because the old stadium and the new, and it's just, the old would be obviously that first championship. It just stands out like it was yesterday, being able to win that one as a young player. The Yankees had been so long since they'd won a championship in '96, and for us to win that championship and kind of start the whole run that we got on. And then in 2009, in the new ballpark, the first year, being able to, pitch the clinching game there was a great moment for me. And I know you asked for one, and I'm giving you several, but then, of course, the moment with Derek, his last hit to win that game, his final season, and then the moment with Mo out on the mound. Those are going to be moments that, when I'm asked about them, those are always going to have to be brought up, because those were so special to me now, and so thankful I was able to get those that late in my career, those moments.
Well, when you have your number retired, you're entitled to as many moments as you want, so I think that's fair. Mike and Andy Pettitte, the reaction that Chuck Knobloch had on Twitter, I'm sure you've been asked about it before. It took me aback, and it may have taken others aback. For those who didn't see it, he, upon the news that you are having your number retired, tweeted, "Congrats to 46, Yankees retiring his number. Hopefully they don't retire it like his HGH testimony." What was your reaction to Chuck Knobloch tweeting that?
Well, really, I just... unfortunately, my kids told me about it. So that's how I found out about it. And I really didn't even have a reaction other than I know that I had a very good relationship. And I thought, I've only seen Chuck a few times since he's been retired. And I know that Kay came up, gave me a big hug, and asked about my family and asked about my kids and my boys. The kids were, when we played together, were my boys, and he treated them great, and we had a wonderful relationship. I try to, just like all the players that I play with, that's what I try to do, is invest in relationships and building them up with my teammates, and me and Chuck had a great relationship. So if he feels differently about me now, that has no impact on how I remember Chuck and how I feel about Chuck.
Mike and Andy Pettitte, and obviously, that subject comes up a little bit now with Alex Rodriguez coming back and releasing this handwritten letter yesterday. And, I've pointed to you many times as a person who is the perfect example or illustration of how an athlete receives forgiveness if he asks for it in a legitimate and honest way. What is your take on, because you've obviously been forgiven to where the fans continue to love you, and now the Yankees are retiring your number. What is your perspective on the way your former teammate Alex Rodriguez is handling this situation?
Well, I just found out about this letter this morning. Actually, I just went on MLB Network and I had seen it on there. Yesterday was a busy day for me. I'm helping coach my son's high school team and baseball team, and I was gone from 3 till 8 last night and didn't see anything. I had homework with them, so just seeing it this morning. But for me, it was just come out and tell the truth. And I've said that. I've told Alex, that that's what he needs to do. The forgiveness that I have received from the fans, from the public, I feel like I laid it all out there, on the table. My life has been an open book. I think anyone that's ever played with me or has encountered with me, they know how I live my life. So it's been really easy for me. And I think, I'm so thankful for that. But man, I wish that I hope Alex can get a little bit past this, enjoy his season this year. I hope it works out for him because Alex is a friend of mine. I played with him. Again, he's a teammate, and you know, I'm hoping this, whatever he's done, this letter, I hope it turns out to be good for him, and this season can be a good and a healthy and a successful season for him and hopefully for the Yankees.
Andy Pettitte going to have his number retired by the New York Yankees this year. Congratulations, Andy. It's a pleasure to talk to you again, and we'll see you at Yankee Stadium for what I'm sure will be a very special day. Thanks for a few minutes this morning.
All right, Granny. Thanks, man. You have a great day.
The best of Mike and Mike.
The A-Rod apology letter appeared yesterday, and the first place I saw it was on Twitter. I think everybody immediately started thinking of Frank Caliendo, and when Frank read the LeBron letter as Morgan Freeman. And while the LeBron letter as Morgan Freeman was good, frankly, the Morgan Freeman voice fits this one even better. So in case you missed it, here it is again. This was Frank Caliendo. This is Frank Caliendo as Morgan Freeman reading A-Rod's apology letter.
To the fan, I take full responsibility for the mistakes that led to my suspension for the 2014 season. I regret that my actions made the situation worse than it needed to be. To Major League Baseball, the Yankees, the Stein family, the Players Association, and you, the fan, I can only say I'm sorry. I accept the fact that many of you will not believe my apology or anything that I say at this point. I understand why, and that's on me. It was gracious of the Yankees to offer me the use of Yankee Stadium for this apology. But I decided the next time I'm in Yankee Stadium, I should be in pinstripes, doing my job. I served the longest suspension in the history of the league for PED use. The commissioner has said the matter's over. The Players Association has said the same. The Yankees have said the next step is to play baseball. I'm ready to put this chapter behind me and play some ball. This game has been my single biggest passion since I was a teenager. When I go to spring training, I will do everything I can to be the best player and teammate possible, earn a spot on the Yankees, and help us win. Sincerely, Alex.
It's brilliant. I don't even know what else to say. I mean, he's a genius. The man is a genius. He's a national treasure.
This has been the best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The best of Mike and Mike.